Dawn broke cold across the prairie outside Copper Canyon, painting the sky in ashen rose. Hazel Whitcomb shouldered the water yoke, feeling worn wood settle against her collarbone. The twin bucket swung empty as she walked the rutted path toward the creek boots squelching in mud that grew softer each week. Distant cattle bawled. Hazel paused where the path dropped toward water, listening. The creek's voice had changed. What had been a steady rush in spring was now a dying murmur. She knelt at the bank, dipping the first bucket. Water ran clear but shallow, exposing stones submerged a month ago. As she filled the second bucket, a shadow fell across the water. She looked up sharply, hand moving to the knife at her belt. Nothing. Just cottonwoods swaying leaves, whispering secrets she couldn't understand. By mid-morning, the log ranch house filled with cornbread and stew. 30 children filed in Apache Navajo others. Orphans pushed off their lands. They took places at rough benches lining the long table. Hazel ladled stew, offering each child a tired smile. A girl with twin braids, Kaya reached for bread too soon. Hazel gently moved it back. "Wait for everyone, sweet one." Kaya's sister Nasha whispered in Apache. "Patience brings reward." The front door stood open. Dust swirled in golden light. Then a shadow cut through and the room fell silent. A tall man stepped inside, lean frame and fringed buckskin hair in 2 braids threaded with turquoise beads. Over one shoulder, a wrapped bundle. 3 children stared wide-eyed at the warrior in their doorway. His gaze swept the room, children food the woman in the stained dress. Then his eyes met Hazel's, and something shifted in the air. Outside, wind rattled shutters, carrying dust and distance and change. Hazel Whitcomb had been a widow 14 months. She was 26 but looked older. Missouri felt like another country now, the farm where she and Thomas had planned their future. Fever took Thomas on the trail west. One day whistling, 3 days later, dead. Among his possessions, she'd found a leather notebook, land parcels, water rights, cryptic initials, M10B. Sums impossibly large for a ranch hand. One page said, "Promise kept, children protected, land held in trust." She tucked it away, meaning to examine it later. Hazel arrived in Copper Canyon with $7, that notebook, and no plan. She'd been 2 days from selling her wedding ring when brave Ben Horner found her. Ben was weathered, 50-something, stubborn. "Can you cook for a crowd?" he'd asked. "I can cook." "Ranch needs a woman's hand. Owner's away. Want someone to mind the place and cook for some children." Children. Native children. Orphans. Somebody's trying to keep them fed, teach them English, keep them out of agencies where they die like flies. Hazel felt fierce purpose stir. "When do I start?" That was 6 months ago. The ranch sat where the creek ran strongest. The house was long and low, dominated by a table Ben and another man had built. Children slept in side rooms, 3 high bunks. Hazel had a tiny room off the kitchen. The man in the doorway was Mongguao. He came and went without announcement, sometimes gone for days. He spoke little, every word weighed like gold dust. What struck Hazel was how Mongguao moved through the ranch, not like a visitor, but with possessive familiarity. He knew which floorboards creaked, which shutters stuck where the well rope frayed. Once she'd found him at the western boundary, hand on a wooden post he'd clearly placed years before, staring at the canyon with profound grief. She'd learned he was Apache, a scout between bands and army posts. Early 30s, eyes older. He could fix anything, track anyone, move through hills so quietly even children didn't hear him coming. What she didn't know was anything about the ranch's true owner, beyond being away on business. Now Mongguao stood in the doorway, bundle over his shoulder, buckskin marked by travel. "You're late," Hazel said. "The stew is cooling." Council took longer than expected. Army captains talk much, listen little. Tension broke. Kaya and Nasha leaned toward bread. Hazel placed her hand between them and the basket. "Wait, we all eat together." She glanced at Meng Guao, saw approval flicker in his expression. Children began eating. Hazel served last portions, then sat where she could see the whole table. Meng Guao remained standing. After a moment, Hazel carried him a bowl. "You should eat too." He took it, but didn't sit. "I eat after." "After what?" "After I know they have enough." Hazel nodded slowly, understanding this wasn't just work. These children were something closer to the bone. Yanaba, an older boy, looked up. Did the bluecoats listen this time? They listened. Whether they heard is another question. Small Tahoma added solemnly, "My grandfather says listening and hearing are different. Listening is with ears. Hearing is with heart." "Your grandfather is wise," Meng Guao said. In that cramped room, lamplight through the door, clay bowls on shelves, children crowded together, 3 people formed something fragile. The Apache warrior who stood when others sat, and the white widow who rationed bread like ammunition, and 30 small witnesses who depended on both. Outside, the creek murmured its weakening song, and in Western Hills other plans were already moving. 3 days later, Victor Lemaire arrived with Ben. Hazel was kneading dough when she heard horses. Ben rode his roan beside him, a pale, narrow-shouldered man in a city coat. Dust specked the black wool and sweat gleamed on his face. "Hazel, this is Victor Lemaire. He needs to talk to you." "About what?" Victor clutched a leather satchel. "About the ranch, Madame Whitcomb, and about the creek, or what will soon be left of it." Inside, Victor spread survey maps across the table, nudging aside rising dough. "Pardon the intrusion. I work for Monsieur Samuel Talford." Hazel knew the name. Everyone knew Bitter Sam Talford, who ran his cattle empire from Bitter Creek Ranch upstream. "New surveys," Victor said quietly. "Commissioned by Talford, approved 2 weeks ago. They show the creek's headwaters inside his boundaries." Hazel stared at inked borders swallowing the ranch in one bureaucratic stroke. "That's not possible. This land was claimed years ago." Old surveys were imprecise. The new measurements use theodolite chain measure, very scientific. Talford intends to fence the upper canyon and construct a dam to regulate water flow. Anyone downstream can purchase water rights at a fair rate. "Fair rate," Ben repeated bitterly. "Meaning those who don't pay get dust." "I'm only the messenger." Victor wouldn't meet her eyes. "Where does that leave us?" "Talford will allow you to remain temporarily, but the children must eventually relocate. This won't be suitable once improvements begin." The door opened wider. Meng Guao stepped inside chaff, clinging to his sleeves. He took in the maps, the nervous bookkeeper, Ben's anger, and his expression went still-controlled fury. "What is this?" "I'm delivering legal notices." "I heard." Meng Guao moved to the table, blocking the exit. "You choke that creek, you choke them. Children can't drink paper and ink." "Monsieur, the law." "Law. White men's law moves when white men want land, not when we need water." "I'm sorry, truly, but I must deliver these papers or lose my position. I have a family to feed." He placed a stamped notice on the maps. 60 days to make arrangements. After that, construction begins. Any interference meets legal consequences, or worse. After Victor left, Hazel reached for the notice. Meng Guao's hand stopped hers, brief contact-controlled strength. "You read it?" "I can read. My father said a woman who can read is never completely powerless." He released her hand. Hazel unfolded the paper scanning eviction, trespass, unlawful occupation, 60-day deadline. "What does it say?" Hazel read aloud. When she finished, silence filled the room. "We fight," Yanaba asked from the doorway, fists clenched. "We think first, then we fight smart. Anger makes men stupid, and stupid men die easy." That night, after checking each child's bunk twice, Hazel watched Mongguao saddle his horse under moonlight. "Where are you going?" "To see what they're building, to count men and measure progress." "That's dangerous. They won't catch me." He swung into the saddle. "You're good at keeping them safe here. Let me be good at keeping them safe out there." He rode north, following the creek toward the canyon where Talford planned to strangle their future. Hazel didn't sleep. She opened her trunk, found Thomas's notebook. By lamplight, she studied his notations, looking for anything that might help. The initials M10B appeared again and again beside notes about boundaries, water sources, promise kept. What she found would change everything. Mongguao returned before dawn, horse lathered and blowing. Hazel was stirring porridge, eyes gritty from sleeplessness. "You need to see. Get a horse, now. See what we're up against. They've already started. It's worse than we thought." 10 minutes later, she sat behind Mongguao on his gelding, gripping the cantle. The saddle was barely wide enough for one. "Hold on." "I am holding on. Hold tighter. This trail doesn't forgive mistakes." They climbed steeply, following the creek as it narrowed between red stone walls. Higher they went. The creek's voice changed, no longer a murmur, but a dying whisper. Hazel tried not to notice Mongguao's warmth against her arms, how his body moved with the horse like one creature. This closeness was necessity. Yet beneath awareness lay something deeper. Mongguao commanded this terrain, with authority born not of employment, but ownership. He knew every switchback, every unstable stone. This was knowledge of a man who'd walked this ground until it became part of his body's memory. After an hour, Mongguao dismounted, pulled his rifle. "We walk from here. Stay low, stay quiet. If shooting starts, run for the horse. Don't look back. Understand?" "I understand." They climbed the last 100 yards on foot, scrambling over loose shale. At the canyon's rim, Mongguao dropped to his stomach. Hazel followed, crawling until she could peer over. Below, 20 men swarmed the creek bed, stacking rocks, maneuvering wagons. The creek was diverted to a temporary channel, barely a foot wide. Workers built a timber framework across the bottleneck, designed not just to control water, but weaponize it. More chilling were barrels in the shade, each stenciled black powder and blasting powder. 2 riders watched them, rifles ready. How long before they finish? 2 weeks, maybe 3. But damage begins when the temporary channel is complete. Another few days. Not enough time for court. Not enough time for anything except desperate measures. A stone shifted under Hazel's boot, clicking as it tumbled. The sound echoed like a gunshot. A guard's head jerked up. He shouted. A rifle cracked. The bullet struck stone 3 feet from her head, spraying chips that stung her cheek. Mongguao's arm hooked her waist, dragging her back. Another shot whined overhead. They scrambled along the ridge rocks, and bullets chasing them. A rider spurred up a side trail, trying to cut them off. Hazel's boots skidded. She went down hard on one knee. Mongguao hauled her upright, shielding her as they stumbled toward trees. The rider gained the ridge rifle, swinging toward Hazel's chest. She saw death with absolute clarity. Mongguao drew his revolver and fired. The shot took the man's hat off. The horse reared. The rider tumbled backward, hit the ground, hard, scrambled up and ran hatless down the trail. Why didn't you kill him? Dead men bring soldiers with authority and questions. Scared men just bring more scared men. One I can handle, the other ends everything. They reached the horse mounted. Hazel clutched Mongguao's waist as the gelding plunged down at suicidal pace. Behind them, gunfire cracked uselessly. By the time they reached the ranch, Hazel's hands shook badly. Mongguao helped her dismount, steadying her when her knees wobbled. "You're hurt." He tilted her chin, examining cuts on her cheek. Blood had dried in thin lines. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." His thumb brushed her cheekbone with impossible gentleness. "You could have died. You shouldn't have come. But I needed to see." She met his eyes. In that moment, looking into dark depths, holding fierce protectiveness and bone-deep weariness, Hazel understood this man wasn't simply helping. The way he spoke of land moved through that canyon with intimate knowledge, the desperate fury when Victor threatened. These weren't reactions of an employee. These were reactions of a man fighting for something that belonged to him in ways law would never recognize. "Then you know we must fight hard. Talford won't stop because we ask nicely." "Then what do? We make them work for every inch. We make them doubt, and we hope help comes before the creek runs dry. There's something I need to show you. Something Thomas left. It mentions initials M10B repeatedly. Does that mean anything?" Mongguao's face went carefully blank, but not before she saw recognition flash. "Show me what your husband wrote." The following weeks stretched tight as bowstrings. Mongguao organized boys into work parties. They dug catch basins along the diminished flow, shored up the shallow well, deepening it by painful inches, through rock hands blistering despite rags wrapped around tool handles. Hazel rationed flour and beans with miser's precision, stretching every meal to cover 30 mouths. She taught girls to knead dough, measure carefully, waste nothing. The table became an afternoon schoolroom. She showed them how to read medicine labels, calculate fair prices, write their names clearly. Kaya and Nasha shadowed her everywhere. Kaya, despite being 7, organized chaos instinctively. Nasha, a year younger, had a gift for comfort. "Miss Hazel," Nasha said one afternoon, tugging her skirt, "you have worry lines like my grandmother before the soldiers came." Hazel knelt. "Do I suppose I have worries?" "Grandmother said worry lines mean you carry other people's sadness so they don't have to. It's heavy." "Yes, sweet one, very heavy sometimes." "Then I'll carry some too. We can share." The doctor, 5 days later, Tahoma collapsed, burning fever-contaminated water. Hazel rode to town immediately. Dr. Frederick Ames was a weary man, 50-something, graying hair, tired eyes that had seen too much war. He examined Tahoma, then followed Hazel outside to the water barrels. "This is from Talford's dam. The creek's almost gone. We haul from miles downstream now. Even that water's foul." Dr. Ames's jaw tightened. "Keep these children here. Don't let anyone pressure you into moving them. Those places are death traps. Intentions don't fill barrels. No." He pressed laudanum into her hands. "But you need someone in authority to see what Talford's doing. I'll speak to Captain Morrison when he passes through. But I need proof documents, witnesses. Anything showing Talford's deliberately endangering lives for profit." After he left, Hazel stood watching dust devils dance, feeling 30 lives pressing down on her shoulders. The teacher. 3 days later, a young woman rode up on a pinto mare. Dark blue dress, wide-brimmed hat, sunburned face. "Mrs. Whitcomb, I'm Catalina Ruiz. I teach at the schoolhouse in town. Dr. Ames told me about the children." "What about them?" "That they need teaching. That they deserve education as much as white children. I'd like to help." "You know what people will say about your reputation?" "Yes." Catalina's chin lifted. "I'm doing it anyway because what they say matters less than what's right." From that day, Catalina rode out 3 afternoons weekly, bringing slates and primers. She wrote on slates, "Water is life." Land can be stolen, but knowledge lives in the mind. Children repeated them in English, Apache, Navajo, Spanish, a multilingual chorus. The ledger man. 2 weeks later, Victor appeared at dusk alone, looking over his shoulder. "I'm not here for Talford. I need to speak privately. I'm taking terrible risk." Ben emerged with a rifle. "I don't trust him." "Neither do I," Mongwao agreed. "But I want to hear what he says." In the barn, Victor pulled out a folded paper, hands shaking. "Talford keeps a private ledger. I manage his accounts. This is a copy I made at great personal risk." The ledger page listed payments to hired guns under Creek security personnel, but the margin note made Hazel's blood run cold. Widow's Ranch, to serve as example. Willing seller preferable to violent eviction, brings cavalry scrutiny. Apply steady pressure. Orchestrate incidents if necessary. He wants to force you to sell. If you leave voluntarily, no one asks questions. But if you die, especially a white widow, the army investigates. Why show us this? Victor met Mongwao's gaze. Because I'm tired of delivering other people's cruelty. And I have children, 3 daughters, a son. I won't help kill 30 others. He pressed the page into Hazel's hands. Hide this. If cavalry comes, show them. It proves intent. After Victor left, Hazel tucked the page into oilcloth with the ranch's papers. Rising tensions. As days ticked toward Talford's deadline, his presence grew oppressive. Riders appeared on distant ridges at sunrise and sunset, watching through spyglasses. Twice, Ben found cattle carcasses in the creek upstream, deliberately placed to foul water for miles. Mongwao began sleeping in the barn, rifle ready. Hazel barred doors at night, listening to children's breathing, counting each inhale like prayers. One evening, carrying water from the last catch basin, she found Mongwao at the corral fence, staring north. "If we run..." "Where?" he interrupted. "Running only changes which direction the blade comes from. We stay, but we make sure we're fighting for something that can last beyond this battle." He glanced at her. "You ever wonder why I keep coming back?" "Yes, every day. And I think I'm beginning to understand." "Your husband's notebook. M10B, that was my father. Mongwao's son of 10 bears. Thomas was recording payments. I made promises. I extracted land I tried to protect the only way law would allow." Hazel's breath caught, though the revelation was less shocking than it should have been. Too many observations had been accumulating. "You bought this land." 3 years ago, with the last gold my father's band had saved. 20 gold eagles, $400, everything left after soldiers took the rest. I paid Thomas to hold title because law won't recognize Apache ownership. We needed a white name on the deed. And Thomas agreed. Thomas understood. He asked nothing except that we keep children safe. When he died, I thought about telling you immediately, but then I realized a white widow was even better protection. You could sign papers, make legal claims, stand in court. Hazel absorbed this feeling ground shift. "So I've been living on land you purchased, holding title meant only to hide you." "Yes, I'm sorry for the deception. But I needed you to stay, and I didn't know if you would, if you understood the full weight, not just 30 children's lives, but my people's last attempt to hold something of our own. You should have told me. Not because I'd have left, but because I deserved to know the truth of what I was protecting. You're right. And I'm telling you now, before the real battle begins. Because if we survive, I want no more secrets. You're not just the cook. You're my partner in everything that matters." The word partner settled between them with precious weight. Hazel understood then what she'd been realizing over weeks. Mongwao didn't see her as a convenient white face. He saw her as an equal, someone whose judgment he trusted, whose courage he respected, whose presence had become essential. Partners. she repeated softly, extending her hand. Yes, I would be honored. Mongguo took her hand, grip warm and strong. Partners in everything that matters. 4 days later, the revelation came into sharp focus. Hazel was cleaning when her broom caught something on the top shelf. A small wooden box, tumbled down lid, flying open, papers scattering. She knelt to gather them. Most were old letters, a worn Bible. But beneath them, wrapped in oilcloth, was something hidden, a legal document bearing the Territorial Land Office seal. Thomas's signature at the bottom. A land deed for the Copper Canyon parcel dated 3 years before his death. In Thomas's name, properly filed. Clipped to it was a second document entirely in Thomas's hand, received from Mongguo, son of 10 bears of the Chiricahua Apache. The sum of 20 gold eagles, $400, in full payment for the Copper Canyon parcel water rights and grazing lands. Said property to be held in trust for his people and their children in perpetuity, as law does not permit native ownership. This deed serves as proof of true ownership should questions arise. Signed this 17th day of May 1851, Thomas Whitcomb, with witness marks of Benjamin Horner and Mongguo, son of 10 bears. Hazel read it 3 times, hands shaking. Thomas had never told her he owned land, never mentioned Apache Gold acting as trustee any plan beyond heading west. She looked up to find Mongguo in the doorway. He must have seen her from the yard, known immediately what she'd found. His expression held resignation mixed with relief. You knew I'd find this eventually. I hoped you would. He stepped inside, pulled out a thin oilskin packet from inside his shirt, drew out his own copy of Thomas's contract. I bought this land with the last gold my father's band had hidden. 20 gold eagles saved for 3 generations. But law won't recognize a deed in my name, won't recognize that Apache can own anything except what we carry. So I paid your husband, a white man with a white name. He understood what we were trying to do. He asked nothing except that we keep children safe. He laid his copy beside hers. He died before he could tell you. By then the deed was recorded and you inherited it. When I found out, I thought about telling you, but then I realized a white widow is better protection than a dead white man. A widow can sign papers, make legal claims. A dead man's unclaimed land goes to the territory. And a live Apache can't claim anything at all. So you let me think I was just a hired cook. Yes, because I needed you to stay, and I didn't know if you would if you understood the danger. Now you know you've been living on land purchased with Apache gold, holding title meant only to hide the true owner from law, designed to steal everything we have left. Hazel stood pacing. Talford's surveyors will find the deed. They'll see Thomas's name and mine and think they can break one widow. Yes, that's what I counted on, that they'd underestimate you. And if they take it to court, the court will see only the official deed in your name. The private contract doesn't exist in any government record. My copy and yours are the only 2. As far as law is concerned, this ranch belongs to you alone. Hazel picked up Thomas's contract, running fingers over familiar handwriting. If I fight for this land, I'm fighting to protect what you bought. But if I lose, you lose everything, and there's no recourse because this contract doesn't exist. Yes. That's the gamble I made 3 years ago. It was desperate then. It remains desperate now. Why? Why gamble everything on people you had no reason to trust, on a system that's only ever stolen from you? Because we had no other choice. If we don't use their own laws against them even imperfectly, even by hiding behind white names, then we have nothing at all. The old ways are gone. The land we walked freely is parceled and sold. All we have left is adaptation or extinction, and I refuse to choose extinction. He gestured to the contract. That paper is adaptation. It's survival. It's 30 children who eat every day, because a white widow holds title that an Apache warrior bought but can never claim. It's the last thread holding my people's dignity intact in a world that wants to erase us completely. Hazel looked at him, quiet strength, concealing depths of pain and determination she was only beginning to fathom. We're fighting for the same thing. We have been all along. I just didn't understand how deep the fight went. And now you must decide, will you continue to fight for land that's legally yours, but morally mine? Or will you take the easier path and sell? It wasn't really a question. Hazel had made her choice weeks ago. I'll fight. Not because law says this land is mine, but because what happens here matters more than legal ownership. These children matter more. Your people's dignity matters more. I'll fight because it's right, and because you trusted me with something precious when you had no reason to believe I'd honor that trust. Relief flickered across Mongwao's face. He stepped closer, eyes holding hers with intensity that made her breath catch. Thank you for not walking away when you could have. Thank you for trusting me with your father's dream. For teaching me that family is about who you'd bleed for. For showing me that home is something you build, not stumble upon. They stood close together, the two contracts spread on the table like a bridge. Outside, the creek whispered its failing song, and in Western Hills, hammers and saws marked the passing of each precious day before Talford's deadline expired and real war began. 7 days later, death arrived in Copper Canyon. Dr. Ames rode out at sunrise, face grim. He dismounted stiffly, took off his hat. Horatio Talford is dead. Sam's nephew. Found yesterday evening 10 miles north, arrow in his back. What kind of arrow? Old-style Apache. Long stone point eagle feather fletching. The kind not used in these parts for 5 years. Most Apache scouts carry Army-issue ammunition now. Which means someone planted it. That's what I believe. But Sam's calling it murder and raising a posse. By noon, every drunken gun hand between here and Santa Fe will be riding this way, looking for blood and bounty money. Mongwao appeared from the barn, hair loose, practical when expecting trouble because beads catch light. I didn't kill anyone. I haven't been north of the ranch in 3 days. I believe you. But Sam doesn't care about truth. He's been looking for an excuse to come after this place with legally justified violence, and now he has one. Dr. Ames pulled out a folded paper. Victor sent this by runner. It's the wanted notice Sam posted. Hazel read aloud, fury shaking her voice. Wanted Apache outlaw known as Mongwao. Murder of Horatio Talford, horse theft, attempted sabotage. Dangerous. $200 reward, dead or alive. Sam added charges to make you sound like a genuine outlaw. Any man who kills you can claim reward in self-defense, and no jury will question it. This is a lie built on another lie. Horatio was probably killed by one of Sam's own men, a convenient body to justify what he wanted anyway. Of course it's a lie. But lies with official stamps and reward money are harder to fight. The law responds to paper, and Sam has both forged, perhaps, but who will challenge him when there's money to be made? Dr. Ames looked at Mongwao with genuine concern. You need to leave. If the posse finds you here, and they will probably tonight, they'll burn this place, hang you, and call it justice. Oh. Hazel said before Mongwao could speak. If he runs, Talford wins completely. He'll say we were all part of it, that I was hiding a murderer. The ranch will be forfeit, children scattered. If I stay, they come for me anyway, and you're caught in the crossfire. Then we stand our ground together. We hold out long enough for someone with real authority to arrive. That could take days. The nearest cavalry post is 3 days' hard ride. Then we survive for 3 days, Hazel said with fierce determination. Mongwao studied her, weighing her courage. If I flee, Talford burns this house and says you begged for protection. The story becomes simple. Foolish widow helps Apache murderer realizes her mistake too late. No one will question him. But if I stay, the only thing that slows his hand is you, a white widow with legal claim, and children who can testify I was here when Horatio died. Then we hold out long enough for cavalry to see the whole story is built on lies. Can you send an urgent dispatch by rider to the nearest cavalry post? Hazel asked Dr. Ames. I sent one yesterday, as soon as I heard about Horatio. But the nearest cavalry post is 3 days minimum. Even if they ride hard, that's 72 hours you have to survive against a mob with legal justification and financial motivation. We'll manage. After Dr. Ames left, Hazel and Mongwao stood in the yard with the crumpled wanted notice between them. Ben emerged from the bunkhouse, rifle in hand. I heard. What's the plan? We send the youngest children away tonight after dark. Catalina and Dr. Ames can take them to Widow's Peak Mission far enough that Talford won't look there. That's 15 children, which means 15 stay, the older ones who are strong enough to help. The ones who can reload a rifle or run for help. The ones who can choose to stay instead of being forced into danger. And then we board Window's ration ammunition, prepare for siege, and pray cavalry rides faster than Talford's greed. That night, 15 youngest children were bundled into a wagon. Kaya and Nasha clung to Hazel, tears streaming. Why must we go? Nasha sobbed. Because you're my brave ones. I need you safe so I can be strong. Can you do that? Be safe so I don't have to worry. We'll be brave? Kaya said, wobbling but determined. Like you taught us. Brave means doing what's right even when you're frightened. Exactly right, sweet one. I'll come get you as soon as it's safe. I promise. Catalina snapped the reins. The wagon rolled into darkness, carrying half of Hazel's heart with it. She stood until the sound faded, then turned back to where 15 older children and 2 men waited to see if courage and stubbornness would be enough. She didn't sleep. None of them did. They prepared for war. Dust clouds appeared on the eastern ridge at noon, backlit by sun, so they looked like ghosts rising from earth. Hazel counted 20 riders, maybe more. Inside the cabin, Hazel and older children moved with grim efficiency. They overturned the heavy table, dragged it to center, creating a low barricade. Benches stacked against windows. Blankets hung over shutters to stop splinters. Yanaba and 2 boys carried rifles they barely knew how to use. The rest held kitchen knives and iron pokers, useless against firearms, but making them feel less helpless. Mongwao moved between windows, checking sight lines. He'd removed his beaded braids, tied his hair back. The war bonnet bundle still hung untouched. This is not ceremony. This is survival. Ben positioned himself near the back door. His ribs were wrapped tight from an earlier fall, nothing broken but painful enough to slow him. Riders halted just beyond rifle range, spreading out, surrounding the ranch on 3 sides, leaving only the western approach open, deliberate. They wanted to leave an escape route so they could say the fugitives had been given a chance to run. One man rode forward, tall figure in a dark coat. Samuel Bitter Sam. Talford, broad-shouldered, gray-haired, sitting his horse with confidence of someone who'd never truly faced consequences. Mongwao, come out and face justice, or we'll come in and drag you out. Mongwao stepped to the door, rifle loose at his side. You want me, Talford, come take me. But you'll have to come through that door. You murdered my nephew, shot him in the back like the coward savage you are. I killed no one. The arrow in Horatio's back isn't mine. Check the fletching, the style of the stone point. You know this as well as I do. That arrow is a relic, a plant, a lie designed to justify what you planned anyway. I know a lying savage when I see one. Hazel moved to stand beside Mongguao in the doorway, close enough that men outside could see her clearly. She wore her best dress, dark blue, respectable everything Victorian society said a proper widow should be. "Mr. Talford, I'm Hazel Whitcomb, legal owner of this ranch, as recorded in the Territorial Land Office. You're trespassing. If you have accusations of murder, take them to the Territorial Marshal." Talford laughed ugly and mocking. "The widow speaks. Tell me, Mrs. Whitcomb, do you always harbor murderers?" "I harbor children. 30 native children who have nowhere else to go, who've committed no crimes. They deserve protection as much as any white child, and I won't let you harm them to satisfy your greed." "Then send out the Apache and the children can go free." "No," Hazel said simply. Talford's expression darkened. "Then you've made your choice. Whatever happens next is on your conscience." "Whatever happens next is on you. You brought guns and false accusations. You threatened children to steal water and land. And you'll answer for it when the cavalry arrives, and they are coming, Mr. Talford. Dr. Ames sent an urgent dispatch by rider yesterday. Your window for this crime is closing." Doubt flickered across Talford's face. Then it hardened. "Then I'd better work quickly." He wheeled his horse back. The first shot shattered a clay bowl behind Hazel's head. She ducked as Mongguao shoved her behind the doorframe, his body placing itself between her and open air. The room erupted, children screaming, rifles firing back, wood splintering under the hail of bullets. Mongguao fired twice through the door, careful shots that drove nearest riders back without killing. Ben fired from the side window. One of Talford's men tumbled from his saddle, clutching his arm. Blood darkened his sleeve, but he lived. "Stay low," Hazel shouted to children behind the table. "Cover your ears and keep your heads down." The firing continued for what felt like hours, but was probably minutes. When it stopped and the room stank of gunpowder and fear. Broken pottery littered the floor. Daylight showed through a dozen new holes. One younger boy cried silently, a kind of crying that spoke of trauma beyond words. Ben tried to reach the barn to free horses. He made it halfway across the yard before a bullet caught him high in the side. He went down hard, rifle skittering. Hazel screamed. Mongguao was already moving, sprinting into the yard, bullets kicking up dust around his feet. He fired to cover himself, reached. Ben grabbed him by the collar, dragged him back with impossible strength. Hazel threw open the back door, helped haul Ben inside. His blood was hot and slippery on her hands, soaking through her dress. His face had gone gray beneath weathered tan. "I'm fine," Ben gasped, though his voice shook. "Just a graze." "Lie still." Hazel's hands pressed a folded cloth against the wound. The bullet had gouged a furrow across his ribs, but missed anything immediately. Fatal luck, so narrow it made her dizzy. "Don't move, don't talk, just breathe." Around her, children worked with terrible efficiency. Yanaba and Desba reloaded rifles with trembling fingers. A small boy carried water to the wounded with careful movements despite fear. Mongguao positioned himself so anyone shooting through the front door would have to go through him before reaching Hazel or the children. He didn't say anything about it, but Hazel saw it, the deliberate choice the body made shield. Outside, Talford shouted orders, regrouping for another assault. And Hazel, kneeling in blood and broken pottery, understood with terrible clarity that this was only the beginning. As darkness fell, shooting stopped, but silence was worse. In the quiet, Hazel heard a new sound, building like distant thunder, the low rumble of cattle moving fast, bawling and clash of horns. "Stampede," Mongguao said, voice tight with fury. He moved to the front window, peering through a gap. "Talford's driving a herd straight at us. If they hit the house at full speed, these walls will collapse like kindling and we'll all be crushed." Hazel felt ice flood her veins. She looked at the children, 15 pairs of eyes watching her, waiting for her to tell them what to do. Ben lay propped against the wall, too injured to run. How do we stop them? We don't stop them. We split them, turn them aside so they flow around the house like water around a stone. But it'll take precision. He grabbed 2 torches from beside the stove, lit them from banked coals, handed one to Ben. Can you move enough to set fires along the south fence line? I can move enough to do what needs doing, Ben said through gritted teeth, struggling up. We set fires along the fence line. Cattle will shy from flame if they see it in time. But we also need to release our horses from the barn, send them out to scatter and split the herd before main impact. I'll do the barn, Hazel said before her rational mind could overrule. Too dangerous, Monguao said flatly. Everything is too dangerous. But you and Ben can't reach both the barn and fence line at the same time, and children can't handle frightened horses. It has to be me. For a heartbeat, Monguao looked like he'd argue. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. Take Yanaba with you. He knows horses. And if anything goes wrong, you get these children out through the back and run. Hazel interrupted. He didn't promise. They moved. Thunder of hooves was louder now, earth-shaking, apocalyptic. Hazel and Yanaba sprinted across the yard toward the barn, her skirts tangling around her legs. She cursed the layers of fabric impractical clothing Victorian society demanded, even when lives depended on running faster than death. They reached the barn-flung doors wide. Inside, horses were panicked eyes, rolling white hooves, striking stall walls. Hazel slapped the first horse on the rump, sending it bolting. Yanaba did the same. Within seconds, all 6 horses were loose and running toward the oncoming herd. Outside, Monguao and Ben ran along the fence line, touching torches to dry grass. Flames leaped up, creating a wall of light and heat. Lid cattle shied away, turning stumbling into animals behind them. But not all turned. A massive longhorn bull veered toward the barn, instead driven mad by noise and fire and crush of bodies. Horns spread wider than a man's outstretched arms. It came straight at Hazel with single-minded determination, head-lowered horns aimed at her chest with momentum of half a ton behind them. She froze completely. Later, she wouldn't remember the decision, only that her body stopped responding while her mind screamed at her legs to move. She saw death in perfect detail, the bull's red-rimmed eyes rolling with terror and rage, foam flecking its muzzle-razor tips of horns that would punch through her body like paper. Then Monguao was there, appearing from nowhere. His hand fisted in the back of her dress and yanked her with brutal force behind a corner post, just as the steer slammed into wood, where she'd stood a heartbeat before. The post shuddered violently, the barn wall groaning, but it held. The bull wheeled away, rejoining the herd that was splitting now, flowing around the house in 2 streams instead of one crushing wave. For one suspended heartbeat that felt like eternity, compressed Hazel and Monguao were pressed together behind the post, both panting desperately. She could feel the heat of him through thin fabric, hard muscle beneath his buckskin, rapid thunder of his heart against her shoulder blade. His hand was still twisted in her dress, breath harsh against her hair. Something passed between them, recognition of mortality connection, forged in nearly dying together, intimacy of shared survival, that went deeper than words could express. Then the moment shattered. He released her, stepped away. "Check the corrals," he said, voice rough with emotion. "Make sure none of the horses are trapped." Hazel nodded wordlessly, not trusting her voice, and turned to do something, anything that wasn't standing frozen, while her hands shook and her heart threatened to pound out of her chest. The stampede passed like a summer storm, violent and destructive, but ultimately survivable. It left destruction, broken fences, trampled gardens, the chicken coop crushed to splinters. But the house still stood, and everyone inside lived. For now. But as Hazel caught her breath and checked children for injuries, she knew with bone-deep certainty that Talford wouldn't stop. He'd committed too much to simply ride away defeated. The final confrontation was coming, and it would be worse than anything they'd faced yet. By dawn, exhaustion had settled over them like physical weight. Hazel's hands shook constantly with fine tremors. The children huddled together, some sleeping despite danger, others staring at nothing with wide, traumatized eyes. Talford's men had pulled back, leaving the yard littered with spent shells and broken rails. Inside ammunition was running dangerously low, perhaps 30 rounds between 3 rifles. Dr. Ames appeared just after sunrise, slipping through the siege line during confusion. He brought supplies and news. The cavalry is still 2 days out at minimum. Captain Morrison is coming from Fort Union, which is a very long ride. 2 more days. We don't have supplies for 2 more days. We're almost out of ammunition, no water except what's in the last barrel, and Ben can't fight anymore. Then we give Talford something bigger to worry about than this ranch, Dr. Ames said grimly. He'll make his final move today, I'm certain of it. He knows cavalry is coming, and knows his window for calling this legal justice is closing. What move? The dam. He'll ride up to the canyon with his men and blow it deliberately using black powder charges, trying to flood this valley and wash away evidence of his siege. Then he can claim you sabotaged his construction, caused the disaster. Your bodies wash away with the floodwaters. He rebuilds the dam after suitable mourning, and no one questions the story. That's insane. He'd destroy his own water source. Temporarily, a broken dam can be rebuilt in months, but a reputation destroyed by federal investigation, that can't be rebuilt at all. Better for him to create a disaster he can blame on you. Then we stop him at the dam, Mongwao said, standing with visible effort. We end this where it began, with water and stone and the truth about who really owns this land. You can barely stand, Hazel protested. Neither can many of us, but we're all going anyway. Because if that dam breaks wrong, it'll wash away not just this ranch, but 3 others downstream, plus destroy the creek's natural channel for years to come. We can't allow that. I'll stay with the children, Dr. Ames said, picking up Ben's rifle. I can hold them off for a little while if Talford's men come back. I'm a non-combatant, a doctor. They'd have to be truly lawless to kill me outright. Hazel retrieved the oilcloth packet, Thomas's contract, Victor's ledger page. Evidence fragile and precious that might mean something if they lived long enough to show it. They rode north along the creek, following churned hoofprints that marked Talford's route. They reached the canyon as the sun climbed higher, painting rocks in red and gold. Below, Talford's men swarmed over the half-finished dam with frantic energy, placing black powder kegs and blasting powder charges along the downstream face with far more explosive than necessary for controlled demolition. This wasn't careful engineering, and this was deliberate, catastrophic destruction disguised as accident or sabotage. Wooden kegs sat in clusters near water's edge, each marked with crude stenciling warning of volatile contents, black powder and blasting powder that could tear stone apart if used in sufficient quantity. Men handled them with nervous carelessness, movements jerky and unpredictable. Talford himself stood near the largest cluster, shouting orders with increasing desperation, limping noticeably from where a bullet had grazed his leg during the siege. We need to scatter those powder kegs before they light the fuses. Mongwao whispered voice, carrying focused intensity. If they all explode in sequence as planned, the canyon wall comes down in a landslide, and the flood will be catastrophic. He raised his rifle, taking careful aim at the nearest keg positioned precariously on stones. The shot rang out sharp and clear, echoing off canyon walls. The bullet struck the keg dead center, punching through wood and rupturing the container. Black powder spilled out in a dark stream, some falling into water, where it would be useless the rest scattering across rocks. Talford's men dove for cover, shouting in panic. One returned fire, wildly, shots going wide. "My turn," Hazel said, surprising herself. She'd been practicing with Ben's rifle over past weeks. She sighted carefully on another keg near the dam's base, took a breath to steady herself, squeezed the trigger. The recoil drove into her shoulder, hard enough to bruise, but the shot flew true. The keg split open as her bullet struck metal banding, scattering powder and rendering it useless. Below, panic spread through workers like wildfire. Men abandoned positions, running for horses, clearly not being paid enough to die in an explosion. "One more," Mongguao said, already taking aim at a third keg positioned dangerously close to the dam's main supports. His shot was perfect. The keg exploded in a controlled burst as the bullet sparked against iron hoops, sending powder spraying harmlessly into the creek where water neutralized it. But one nervous rider trying to move a remaining keg to safety mishandled it badly. The barrel slipped from his grip and fell splitting open against rocks. Black powder scattered everywhere, a dark stain spreading. A lit fuse, already burning from earlier preparations, touched the powder. The explosion was devastating. The blast tore through the staging area with the sound of the world ending, a roar that deafened and disoriented. Chunks of rock and splintered wood flew in all directions like artillery shrapnel. One man went down immediately, body limp and broken. Another staggered away, screaming, clothes smoking. But the real danger came from secondary explosions. The first blast had thrown burning debris into other powder stores, and now they began to detonate in chaotic sequence. Part of the dam's face sheared away with a grinding roar, sending a powerful surge of water thundering down the canyon. Another blast ricocheted off the canyon wall, knocking loose an avalanche of stone that crashed onto what remained of the construction site. Talford himself was thrown hard against a boulder, body limp, leg twisted beneath him at an unnatural angle. He screamed a raw animal sound of pain and fury and disbelief. Mongguao, Hazel, and Ben scrambled down the slope, sliding and stumbling on loose shale. By the time they reached the canyon floor, most of Talford's surviving men had fled, mounted on whatever horses they could catch and riding hard away. Talford lay crumpled against the boulder, face contorted with agony. Mongguao kept his rifle trained on him as Hazel approached cautiously. "You did this," Talford spat through clenched teeth. "You sabotaged my dam, killed my men. You sabotaged your own dam," Hazel said coldly. "Your greed lit the fuses. Your carelessness caused the chain reaction. We only came to stop you from murdering everyone downstream, including 30 innocent children. No one will believe you. I'm a respected businessman. You're just a widow playing house with savages. Perhaps they'll believe this." Hazel pulled out the oilcloth packet, spread the documents on a flat rock where Talford could see them. "Your bookkeeper's ledger showing payments to hired guns and explicit plans to drive us out. A contract showing this land was purchased legally long before you filed your fraudulent surveys. And witnesses, native children who will testify, a doctor who will swear to what he saw, a teacher who documented everything, and your own bookkeeper who has already turned on you." In the distance, clear and unmistakable, a bugle sounded the cavalry call that meant authority and law and the end of lawlessness. Hazel looked down at Talford, seeing him clearly not a mighty cattle baron, but a frightened old man whose empire was built on theft and violence. "The law is coming now. The real law, not the version you buy with bribes. And you're going to answer for every single thing you've done." The cavalry detachment was small, 12 men and Lieutenant Nathaniel Hayes, but it was enough. They rode into the canyon with weapons drawn and authority behind them. Behind the soldiers rode Arthur Greaves, the federal land agent thin man, with wire spectacles and a leather portfolio containing all legal documentation of every claim in the territory. Lieutenant Hayes surveyed the ruined dam's scattered bodies, Talford pinned against rocks with Mongwao's rifle trained on him. His expression was grim but unsurprised. "Someone explain this situation, quickly before I arrest everyone here." Hazel stepped forward, squaring her shoulders despite exhaustion. "Lieutenant Hayes, my name is Hazel Whitcomb. I'm the legal owner of the Copper Canyon Ranch as recorded in the Territorial Land Office. Mr. Samuel Talford attempted to steal my water rights by building an illegal dam on land he fraudulently claimed through manipulated surveys. When I wouldn't be intimidated into leaving, he manufactured false accusations of murder against Mongwao, who has been helping me protect 30 native children under my care." "She's lying," Talford shouted. "The Apache murdered my nephew. The arrow proves it." "The arrow proves nothing except that someone wanted to frame a convenient scapegoat," Dr. Ames said, stepping forward. "I examined the body myself, Lieutenant. That arrow was old style with stone point and eagle feather, fletching a type not used by any Apache scouts in this territory for at least 5 years. It was planted specifically to create justification. I have proof of Mr. Talford's intent," Hazel added. She handed Greaves the oilcloth packet. "The ledger page shows payments to hired guns and explicit notes about making an example of us. The contract shows this land was purchased legally 3 years ago, with proper payment long before Talford filed his fraudulent surveys." Greaves examined the documents with meticulous care, holding them to light, comparing dates and signatures. When he finished, he looked at Talford with cold disapproval. "These documents are genuine. The ledger entries match Mr. Talford's handwriting from other documents in my files, and the land contract predates his survey claim by more than 2 years, which means his claim is entirely fraudulent. You can't trust documents provided by hostiles," Talford protested desperately. "I trust documents that match official records," Greaves said. "And I trust physical evidence." He gestured broadly to the ruined dam. "You destroyed your own construction with excessive explosive force, far more than necessary for legitimate water control. That's not the action of an honest businessman, Mr. Talford." Lieutenant Hayes studied Mongwao. "You the one they call Mongwao?" "Yes." "You kill Horatio Talford?" "No, sir. I was at the ranch when he died, Mrs. Whitcomb. Brave Ben Horner and 15 children can testify to that. I've killed no one during this entire conflict, though I've had many opportunities." Hayes's eyebrows rose. "Why not?" "Because dead white men bring soldiers with authority and questions. Living white men who run away just bring more trouble later. I chose the trouble that gave us the best chance of surviving long enough for justice to arrive." Something like respect flickered across Hayes's face. He turned to his sergeant. "Place Mr. Samuel Talford under arrest for attempted murder, fraud, destruction of property, conspiracy, and endangerment of minors. Take him to Fort Union under guard and hold him for territorial trial." As soldiers moved to comply, Talford lunged forward despite his broken leg, face contorted with rage. "This isn't over. They'll never let you keep it. A woman running a ranch with savages. The territory will take it from you within a year." "The territory will do no such thing," Greaves said coldly. "Mrs. Whitcomb has clear legal title, documented proof of purchase, and multiple credible witnesses. If anyone attempts to interfere with her rightful ownership, they'll answer to my office and the federal government." He turned to Hazel. "Mrs. Whitcomb, the territorial governor, will expect regular reports on the ranch and the children. Make sure those reports reach Santa Fe on schedule. As long as you maintain those standards, your ownership is secure." "I understand. Thank you." Hayes glanced at Mongwao again, something unspoken passing between them. Mrs. Whitcomb, the territorial government strongly suggests you maintain proper documentation of everyone residing or working at your property. Which means if Mr. Mongguao continues to assist with the children's care and the ranch's operations, that should be documented as legitimate employment with appropriate duties, not other less clearly defined arrangements. Of course, Lieutenant. Mr. Mongguao has been invaluable in managing water resources, teaching the boys essential skills, and maintaining security. I'll document his contributions appropriately. The soldiers left, taking Talford with them. His screams and threats echoed off canyon walls until distance swallowed them. Dr. Ames tended to Ben's wound properly. Greaves made copies of essential documents, recorded notations in his ledger, and rode away with promises to update official records within the week. And then finally it was quiet, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm has passed, and the world is still assessing damage. Hazel Mongguao and Ben stood together as water poured freely over the ruined dam, no longer controlled or weaponized, but simply flowing as it had for thousands of years. The sound was music after so many days of fear, water running free, life returning. "It's over," Hazel said softly. "For now." Mongguao agreed. But Talford was right about one thing: this fight will come again, in different forms. Men like him are everywhere. Then we'll fight again when the time comes. Hazel held out her hand, and after only brief hesitation, Mongguao took it. His grip was warm and strong and calloused. She felt the connection between them forged in fire and blood, and 30 children's lives settle into something that felt permanent. Together, as true partners, as equals, as whatever we need to be to keep those children safe. Partners. Mongguao repeated, testing the word. Then he smiled, small, genuine, utterly unexpected. Yes, partners in all things. They rode back to the ranch as the sun climbed higher, turning prairie grass to gold and sky to endless blue. Months that followed transformed the ranch without changing its purpose. Wreckage of Talford's dam was cleared by Army engineers sent by the territorial governor. They restored the creek to its natural channel, removing debris and allowing water to find its ancient path. Under Dr. Ames's guidance, Mongguao and the older boys dug a deeper stone-lined well inside the ranch yard. It took 3 weeks of back-breaking labor, but when finished, the water that rose was cold and sweet, and entirely their own. The youngest children returned from Widow's Peak Mission in a wagon driven by Catalina, who moved into a small cabin Ben built near the main house. Her lessons expanded to morning sessions, teaching not just letters and arithmetic, but practical civics, legal rights, how to file complaints with authorities, how to write formal letters that demanded to be taken seriously. Knowledge is the only power that can't be stolen once you truly possess it, she told them repeatedly. Ben's wound healed slowly, but cleanly, leaving a puckered scar he displayed with wry pride. "Proof I'm not too old to be useful," he'd say. He also began courting Catalina with awkward sweetness, bringing wildflowers, repairing her cabin, without being asked, sitting beside her at supper and talking about his dreams. Catalina accepted his attention with grace and growing affection, and the children began placing playful bets on when he'd finally ask her to marry him. Victor Lemaire quietly left Talford's ruined empire and found honest work with a freight company in Santa Fe. He sent Hazel a letter 6 months later, apologizing again and enclosing $20 to help with the children payment he wrote for parts of his conscience he'd sold and was now trying to buy back. Hazel wrote back thanking him and inviting him to visit, but he never came. Some debts could only be paid through distance and slow accumulation of better choices. Samuel Talford was convicted of fraud, attempted murder conspiracy, and other charges after a 3-week trial that drew spectators from across the territory. He spent 3 years in territorial prison. When he emerged broken in body, spirit, and reputation, he left the territory entirely, last seen boarding a stage heading east. His vast ranch holdings were sold at public auction to satisfy legal debts. The land passed to various buyers, including a younger rancher named Miller, who proved willing to share water fairly and maintain good relations with neighbors, regardless of race. The dam was never rebuilt. The creek ran free and natural. One bright spring morning, Hazel rode into Copper Canyon and emerged from the Territorial Land Office with an updated deed identical to the original, except for new notations confirming her sole ownership, updated surveys showing the ranch's boundaries with precision, and official stamps that would discourage any future challenges. In the privacy of her room that night, by candlelight, she took out pen and ink and wrote a single line on the back of the deed in blank space, where official eyes would never look. Held in trust for the children and for Mongwao's people, for as long as this ground endures. Guarume 1854. She showed it to no one. It was a promise written for herself, a reminder that law could proclaim one truth, while the heart knew another, deeper one. That evening, as sun set and painted the prairie in amber and rose, Hazel stood at the long table preparing supper. The room smelled of roasted chicken, fresh bread from the new oven, and early greens from the garden that now flourished with reliable water. 3 children sat at the near end, ready to eat, faces bright with health and unconscious confidence of children who felt genuinely safe. The front door opened, and Mongguao stepped inside. He'd spent the day with older boys laying out new irrigation ditches. Dust streaked his sleeves and clung to his hair, which he now wore sometimes in traditional braids with turquoise beads, and sometimes loose and practical. The war bonnet bundle no longer hung on its peg. He'd taken it down months ago and stored it in his cabin, bringing it out only for ceremonies. "That's for honoring the past," he'd explained to Yanaba. "But this is for building the future." "You signed the updated papers in town today." "I did. Seems I own quite a lot I never paid for with my own money." Mongguao studied her. His gaze took in the children passing bread from hand to hand, the table that had been shattered by bullets, and then carefully repaired the walls that still showed subtle scars, but stood solid. "You pay every day, in ways no deed can measure and no court would understand. You pay with your time, your energy, your worry, your fierce commitment. Sit. We should all eat together, partners, family, whatever we're becoming." Albert Mongguao hesitated only a heartbeat, old habits of caution slow to fade. But then he moved to the table and took his seat rifle still leaning against the wall within easy reach, because some precautions were simply practical wisdom. As children passed food with cheerful chatter, Kaya describing complex arithmetic she'd mastered, Nasha telling an elaborate story about hawks she'd been observing, Yanaba discussing irrigation principles with adult seriousness. Hazel and Mongguao moved around each other in the small room with practiced ease. She knew without discussing it that he'd always place himself between danger and the doorway. He knew with equal certainty that she'd always make sure there was enough food for everyone, even if it meant she ate less herself. They moved together like complementary parts of a single whole. After supper, when children had scattered to evening routines, Hazel stepped outside to watch last light fade. Mongguao joined her, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Do you think it will truly last? What we've built?" "Nothing lasts forever in precisely the same form. But some things last long enough to matter profoundly, and some things create echoes that continue long after the original sound has faded." He turned to face her more fully. "You could still sell this place. Take the money and go back east, where you wouldn't have to fight so hard. They're mined by something stronger than blood or legal papers. They're mined by choice, by commitment. And that matters infinitely more." She paused. "And besides, where would I go? Missouri belongs to someone else's past now. This place has become home in a way I didn't expect and can't easily explain. Perhaps the truest definition of home is not where you come from, but what you're willing to fight to protect. I understand that better than most. I was born to a homeland that no longer exists in any form. I remember the land parceled and sold, the sacred places fenced and renamed. So I learned to carry home inside myself, in memory and purpose, rather than expecting it to exist in any fixed location. He reached out and took her hand, calloused fingers interlacing with hers. But you've given me something I didn't expect to find again. A place that feels like it could become home, not because of what it was in the past, but because of what we're building here together in the present. That's a rare and precious gift. I feel the same. You've shown me that family is not only about blood relation or legal certificates, but about who you'd stand beside when everything falls apart, about who you trust with the things that matter most. They stood together as darkness deepened and stars began to emerge, ancient patterns that had guided travelers long before borders divided the land below. There's something I need to ask you. Mongguo said, his voice carrying nervousness she'd never heard before. Something I've been thinking about for months, but wasn't certain how to approach. What is it? I know the world isn't ready for an Apache man and a white widow to stand together in the eyes of law and society as equals. I know there'll be judgment, disapproval, perhaps legal challenges. But I also know that I don't want to continue living as if we're merely business partners or colleagues. He took both her hands. What I'm trying to say badly is that I'd be honored if you'd consider becoming my wife, in truth, not just in practical partnership. Not today, perhaps, not even this year, while the legal situation remains precarious, but someday, when the timing is right. Would you be willing to wait for that day with me, to work toward a future where we can stand together openly? Hazel felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but overwhelming relief. Yes, I'd wait for that day gladly. I'd stand with you before any authority whenever you feel the time is right. What we've built together already feels like marriage in every way that truly matters: trust, commitment, shared purpose, mutual respect. The legal ceremony will simply be making public what has been true in private for months. Mongguo pulled her closer, and for a long moment they simply held each other in darkness, two people from vastly different worlds who had found unexpected common ground. Then we'll wait for the right moment. We'll continue building what we've started, protecting these children, proving through our actions that partnership across divisions is not only possible, but can create something stronger than either tradition alone. And when the time is right, when we have enough stability, we'll make our commitment official. Agreed. Partners now, partners always, and someday, when the world is ready, or when we decide we no longer care whether it's ready, husband and wife in name as well as deed. They stood beneath the vast canopy of stars, making promises that would be kept, not because any document required it, but because they had chosen each other freely across every boundary society had erected to keep them separate. 2 years later, on a warm morning in June 1856, Hazel stood in the doorway, wearing a simple dress of pale blue cotton, not white because second marriages for widows followed different conventions. Catalina had helped her sew delicate embroidery at the collar during long winter evenings. Mongguo waited in the yard, dressed in his finest buckskin, with hair in traditional braids adorned with turquoise beads and silver work that had belonged to his father. He wore no war bonnet. This was not a ceremony of conflict, but of union. The circuit preacher who had married Ben and Catalina the year before stood ready, his weathered face showing none of the judgment many of his profession would have displayed. All 37 children attended the original 30 plus 7 more who had arrived over the past 2 years. They sat on benches arranged in rows. Ben stood as Mongguo's witness arm around Catalina, who cradled their infant daughter. Dr. Ames stood as Hazel's witness. The ceremony was brief and simple. When the preacher asked if they took each other as husband and wife, their responses carried the weight of 2 years spent building toward this moment. "I do," Hazel said clearly. "I do." Mongguao responded with equal firmness. "Then by the authority vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, and in the eyes of the one who sees beyond the divisions humans create, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Mongguao smiled, the full, genuine smile that Hazel had learned meant profound joy, and kissed her gently while the children cheered with uninhibited enthusiasm. The celebration that followed was simple, but joyful, a feast prepared over days' music from Yanaba's increasingly skilled fiddle dancing that mixed frontier reels with traditional Apache movements, laughter that spoke of genuine happiness. As evening fell and festivities wound down, Hazel and Mongguao stood together at the edge of lamplight. "Do you think we did the right thing? Making it official, giving people legal documentation to attack if they choose? I think we did the only thing that felt honest. Hiding our commitment protected us from some criticism, but it also taught the children to be ashamed of what we'd built. Now they can see that we believe enough in this partnership to claim it publicly, regardless of consequences. That lesson is worth whatever trouble may come." "I agree. And if trouble comes, we face it together, as we always have." 3 years later, 1859, the ranch had grown again. The main house had been expanded twice. 42 children now, the original 30 plus 12 more who had arrived in successive waves. A second building served as proper schoolhouse, with Catalina teaching mornings and Hazel afternoons. Several of the oldest original children had left to begin their own lives, some to work on neighboring ranches, others to continue education in Santa Fe or back east, where generous sponsors provided scholarships. Yanaba, now 19, had become Mongguao's right hand in managing daily operations. He moved with growing confidence, teaching younger boys the skills he'd learned. Kaya, at 13, had developed a gift for teaching that made Catalina declare she should someday run her own school. Nasha had become the ranch's unofficial nurse, assisting Dr. Ames and learning medical skills with focused intensity. One spring morning, a rider appeared, Arthur Greaves, the federal land agent. He dismounted stiffly. "Mrs. Mongguao, what brings you out here, Mr. Greaves?" "Good news for once." He pulled documents from his case. "The territorial governor has reviewed your reports over the past 3 years, all 42 of them filed on time with meticulous documentation, and has decided to grant your ranch official status as a territorial Indian mission school, with modest quarterly support from the territorial government and a church society in the east." Hazel's breath caught. "What does that mean precisely?" "It means you'll receive quarterly funding to help with operations. It means your educational credentials will be recognized officially. And most importantly, it means you have full legal protection of both territorial and federal government. No one can challenge your right to operate or claim you're harboring children illegally." He handed her the documents with warmth. "You've done remarkable work here. The governor's report specifically notes how the children can now read, write, and cipher, how their health has improved, and how many have been able to work and live decently instead of starving. You've proven that Native children can thrive when given genuine opportunity." He writes that what has been done here should guide how the territory treats Indian children far beyond this single ranch. That evening, after children had eaten and scattered, Hazel and Mongguao stood in their familiar spot at the doorway where they'd stood so many times. "We did it. We took your father's gold, my late husband's legal shield, and our combined stubbornness, and we built something that will outlast both of us. We did it together. Neither of us could have succeeded alone. That's the most important lesson we can teach these children, that partnership across difference is not just possible, but necessary. Hazel leaned against him, feeling solid warmth that had become as essential as breathing. Do you ever wonder what your father would think? Every day. And I believe he'd be proud not just of the ranch itself, but that we found a way to use their legal system against itself to protect our children within structures designed to erase them. That's a kind of victory he'd recognize and honor. Inside, they could hear children preparing for bed. Kaya's voice telling a story in Apache Nasha, singing a Spanish lullaby, the comfortable chaos of a large family settling into sleep. How many do you think will eventually serve? The funding allows up to 60. As many as need us and as many as we can properly care for. The goal was never to build an empire, just to create a place where children could survive and remember who they are. They stood in comfortable silence as night deepened. From inside, a small voice called, "Miss Hazel Mongguao, come say goodnight." They turned together and walked back into warmth and light of home, where 42 children waited. The law recognized Hazel Whitcomb Mongguao as the legal owner. The territorial records showed proper documentation and federal approval. But everyone within those log walls understood a deeper truth. This place had been purchased with Apache gold, defended by a white widow's courage, and sustained by a partnership that proved love and commitment could transcend every boundary society erected to keep people separate. And in the end, that was the only truth that truly mattered.